everybody, welcome to Community Collaborators Brain Talk. Today I'm speaking to Danielle from New Zealand Rugby. Thank you so much for joining us today, Danielle. Can you tell us a little bit about your role at New Zealand Rugby?
Vicky, no, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. So I guess my role with New Zealand Rugby is I've been with them for the last 3 years, and in that role I've worked kind of half of my roles with Super Rugby. So I work with Super Rugby teams looking at their injury data and looking at injury patterns there. And then the other half of my role is with the Rugby Smart program. And in that I work primarily in community concussions, so looking at how we manage concussions and how we look after concussions. And really kind of key to that are, our three goals are really around making sure that when concussions happen, whether in a game or training, that player comes off. The second goal is that we get them into a doctor so they can get a diagnosis and get the information that they need to recover. And then the third one is that before they go back to contact, that player has been cleared by a doctor.
Excellent, thanks Danielle. So if you'd like to talk us through the return to learn and return to play, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, for sure. So what I've got here, Vicky, is I'll just share my screen in conjunction with ACC. So it talks about we call it a fact sheet, but really when you talk about a concussion is an injury to your brain. So when you think about that, there's two things that the brain controls. So one, it controls how we move, and it also controls how we think. So when we get injured or when we have a concussion, we've got to think about how we go back with the thinking part, but also how we go back with the moving part. So really there's two steps to that. So we call it the graduated return to learn / work and the graduated return to play. So often what we hear is people are really good about, making sure they go through the steps to get back to sport. But often, particularly, even with people that work at NZR, they'll get concussed on a Saturday and be back at work full time on Monday. So it's just about really reminding yourself that I'm doing a good job, progressing my activity, but I also need to think about the stimulation my brain's getting from work or school. So for that, we kind of go through this graduated return to learn and return to work. And I guess often we hear, particularly when you've got a bit of a sporting background, you want to push through the pain and make sure that, what they say, pain is just weakness leaving the body. But particularly for the brain, it's really important when you're going through this that you're guided by your symptoms. Because the problem is what happens with a concussion is the brain gets kind of shaken up and twisted. And when that happens, the neurotransmitters in the brain release a bunch of chemicals. And when they release those chemicals, it means that those neurons can't communicate together. So what happens is it takes, and we call that a metabolic cascade, but what happens is it takes time for those neurotransmitters to be replenished in those nerves so they start working properly. And the problem is if you continue to stress the brain, that process will slow. It doesn't happen properly. So it's really important that when you're getting back to school or work or back to sport, that you kind of let your symptoms guide what you do. So really for the first 2 days after you've sustained a concussion, what we suggest is that you kind of do 48 hours of rest. So this really is important, is that we avoid screens, because what we do know is that screens emit a blue light. And often that blue light's really hard for our brain to process. So that really kind of stresses the brain out. So you want to avoid, your phone, laptop, computers for 2 days. And anything that may aggravate it. So reading, going to work. So kind of back off those for 2 days. And then you can start to build that up. So starting with 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15. And if you have no symptoms, you can increase it. But the problem is if you do 5 minutes and you end having a raging headache, then you need to dial back on that. So we suggest kind of 4 days or 2 days of rest. And then you can start back to, your school or work activities at home. And if you can get through those sweet, that's awesome. You could probably progress to going back to school or back to work. But again, if you find that, an hour into answering emails, you've got a raging headache, you might have to dial it back. So then in stage 3, what we talk about is maybe going back to school or work part-time. So, going for half a day and seeing how you're going. Particularly, if you're in school and you really struggle with science or math, you may have to avoid those classes for the first couple of days, which I know probably devastates a lot of people. But, you might find that that's just too much stimulation, or you have to work too hard for the brain. So it's just about letting your symptoms guide what you can do. And again, something that you may find you have to do is every hour, you may have to just get out for 5 minutes and just take a break, or go lie down somewhere and just, go outside and just relax, just so you can give that brain a chance to recover a bit before you go back into that stimulating environment. And then what we suggest is, then once you're through that part-time and you have no issues with that, then you can start trying that full-time work. And with that, you may again just find that, for the first week, you have to step out every hour for 5 minutes, just so you can kind of recover. But again, we don't have any guidelines or timeframes on this, other than we suggest that, you take 2 days rest, but really steps 2, 3, and 4 are guided by your symptoms. If you're sweet at home, then you can go back half time. If you're sweet there, then you can go back to full time. But again, if you're really struggling to go to school for, half days, then you've really got to step it back until your brain's ready for those next steps. So that kind of covers getting back to school or work. The next one we talk about is getting back to sport. And I think this is really what people are probably relatively fairly good at. But again, in line with, that graduated return to learn work, the first 2 days of that graduated return to play, you should rest. So you may find that some people tell you need to rest for 2 weeks. Well, we actually found that if you rest for too long, that can actually make you worse as well. So really our recommendation is you rest for 2 days. And again, that's, no running, no sports, avoiding screens. And then if you're fine, you've got through that, and you can still have symptoms. So you may still have a bit of a headache, but you can start light to moderate exercise on day 3. And the key thing for this is you only exercise until you start feeling bad. So you don't want to push through it. So if you go for a walk and, you start to feel dizzy or for a headache, you'll probably have to either shorten the walk or dial down the speed at which you're walking. So it's really symptom guided. And for that, we recommend 2 weeks. And usually, if you're into kind of having a little bit of a goal and are aware of what your heart rate is, they usually recommend this is about 70% of your max heart rate. So you can and the idea is to get that blood flowing, increase the blood flow to the brain, is going to help that brain recover. And again, in that stage, you can do walking, jogging, stationary cycling. You just want to avoid any sort of contact in scenarios where potentially you're going to hit your head. So you'd want to avoid potentially mountain biking, because you don't want to become flying off your bike into a tree. So, at that stage, it's just kind of light to moderate exercise. Then we go into stage 3, which is moderate to high. So the goal is here, we're really thinking about how we move. So we've got that light to moderate covered. Now we want to get the heart really cranking so we can really see how the brain does when we're sprinting and working as hard as we can. So in that stage, and that you go moderate to high, again, you can start doing running drills, you can do sprints, you can do yo-yos, but again, you've got to ensure that there's no contact with these. And then if you get through that sweet, if you find, that really kind of triggers my headaches or dizziness, then you might need to gallop back to stage 2. But if you can get through that sweet, then the next step would be non-contact drills. So remember, the brain, the 2 things it controls is how we move and how we think. So kind of step 1 through to 3 really covers how we move. Step 4, we're starting to incorporate how that brain thinks. So we're getting into some non-contact. So, you're going to have to look where the ball is coming. You're going to have to remember what plays you're supposed to be running. So not only do we have the body moving, but we also have the brain engaged. So it's kind of seeing how the brain deals with those 2 stressors. And this is where you can get into your non-contact stuff. So, you can run plays, you can do lines, you can do catching, passing, and all that kind of stuff. So again, they're incorporating that heart rate, getting that heart rate up, but also getting that brain engaged. So we recommend, again, depending on your age, you do 2 days of that. If you're under the age of 19, if you're 19, you just do, say, if you're out for a week, and then the following week on a Tuesday, you could do a non-contact drill. Again, if you get through that and you have no issues, the next step would to be go in for that medical clearance from a doctor. Once you've done that, say, so now you're to that Thursday training practice, this is where you can try the full contact. So you can start getting to your tackling, your scrumming, and see how your brain does with those things, and if you have any symptoms. So it kind of goes through that progression. And again, if you get through that fine, you're sweet to go back to play. If not, you may need to go back to that non-contact drill, or just stay non-contact drills until kind of the symptoms ease up, and then you can try again for that contact training. So it kind of takes you through that return to learn, but also that return to play. And another thing we kind of have here is we've got the Rugby Smart website. So if you go into www.rugbysmart.co.nz, the homepage looks like this. So then where you can find it is if you go into preventing and managing injuries, you can see here we've got a concussion section. So we tick through to that concussion section. And what it does is it kind of walks through kind of the information that we covered here, but it talks about the 4 R's. And what we've done is we've developed modules that is good. We've got a module that's applicable if you're a player, also a module for if you're a coach, and also a module that for a family member. So let's say I'm a player. So it takes me through to this concussion model. So I click here to begin. So, and then it just takes you through a simulation of a concussion. So here I'm going out to catch the ball. Oh, I've taken a big hit, not doing so good. Kind of wake up and everything's a little bit fuzzy and starting to see double. I don't feel so great after that smash. What could I do? I could keep playing, or I could get off the field. So you can kind of pick your journey. So if I say keep playing, which is not the right answer, hopefully, I get hit again, and it just simulates, potentially, and that's kind of speaks to some of the information we know is that if you've sustained a concussion, your brain controls how you think and how you move. So we do know that with the concussion, potentially that's going to impact on your performance and also put you at a higher risk for injury as well. So that kind of covers, so yeah, those resources are all there. What we do also have here, and I should probably share again, we have, so those are those online modules, but we also have that information about recovery and return. So if you want to learn more about the signs and symptoms, it takes you through again what those red flags are. So these are those symptoms where, it's not a concussion, it's probably something more serious. So it kind of highlights what those red flags are that would require urgent medical attention. So, if you had this, you'd want to send your player or teammate to the doctor right away. These are kind of some symptoms of a concussion, what they say, what they feel. So again, if you've got a friend or a family member or a child that, they come home and they're complaining of a headache, or, they're kind of have this unusual behavior that you can't really explain, they're a little bit of a turkey. You can kind of pop on here and check out and you'd be like, oh, well, maybe they did take a hit during that game that, I want to send them through to a doctor to get checked out. So that's there. We also have information about the recovery and return. So hopefully you should get this from your GP when you go in for that diagnosis assessment. But if you don't, again, we've got all that stages of that graduated return to play are highlighted here. It talks about that return to learn, again, each of those stages. And you can also get a PDF of those guidelines here. So again, that'll take us through to that recovery sheet that I just showed you. So that information's all there. We also have, for those, potentially working with teams or with schools, we also have under the concussion, we have a resources tab. where these are all the concussion-based resources that we have for rugby. So for example, you know, if you're with your school and you want a graduated return to play poster, there you can get the PDF of that. And it's all in there. You know, you can get that information. Otherwise, you know, if you say, oh, potentially, sorry. I didn't mean to close that one. If you wanted any of this information for your school or your club, you can email us here and we can send that information to you. So, you know, if you want any of that information, you just click on that email link, know us how many and what you would like, and we can send those through to you. And then what we have here is there's a fact sheet about the recovery. We've got a poster that covers the return to learn. These are the wallet cards, so those accordion cards that often really were designed for coaches, so a lot of that information's in there. We also have a booklet about recognizing and manage concussions, which we kind of designed more for parents. And then there's an information card. So these seem to be really useful for physios or team managers that they can put in their medical kit, and you know, it's something that they can send home with little Timmy or Susie when they sustain a concussion. That gives mom and dad some information about what to do for the first 2 days. Yeah, so that's kind of I think what's on our website in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danielle. Thank you so much for talking to me today. Awesome to hear about the return to learn and play procedures in place. Really great, easy to follow guide there. And the website looks awesome. Great resources. We'll pop a link up so people can go over and check it out for themselves, have a little play around, and get in touch with New Zealand Rugby if you'd like to order any of those resources. Danielle, thank you once again for your time. Awesome talking to you.